red cape approaches are mostly things that you do to contrast something that's going wrong. And then there's also this other side about the green cape approach, which is, okay, yes, we're going to work on that, but let's also look at your strengths.
Some of the stuff where I found the spiritual community can get kind of toxic is this idea that it's like, always be positive, and you can fall into this trap of like, then that just becomes really stressful. Like, oh shit, I thought it, or oh no, I'm anxious.
I think at some point I fell into my own kind of like a spiral that wasn't going anywhere. This is who I am, and I'm just going to do the best with what I have without any expectations.
The ego is like this hilarious thing that, if it's even real, it is, you're like constantly trying to overcome it while building new ones. You know, like you're building these new, now I'm the spiritual guy. I killed my ego, but your ego is the ego of the spiritual guy.
The more I try to come up with this elaborate plans of how I wanted to live my life, and I remember just crying for a while and just saying like, you know what, life, I'm done. I felt, no, this is life telling me that I wasn't being as creative as I could be. Right now, the pillars that I've developed are presence, purpose, and practice. Purpose in a way that's so beautiful. It's the purpose that you give to any moment, to any activity. Right now, just being here, being honest, opening up my heart, having this conversation. Burnout has been a huge thing since, the pandemic. Everybody's talking about it, but what's the solution? Like, how do we fix that, or not even fix it? How do we cultivate a different state of working? I'm working right now on a specialization on positive psychology, and one of the classes was talking about this analogy of the red cape versus the green cape, and they were saying that red cape approaches are mostly things that you do to contrast something that's going wrong. So what am I doing? What are the patterns? Why am I feeling anxious? Or why am I feeling this emotion again? Why am I feeling sad or fear? And that's all around a red cape approach. You're like trying to fight it. You're trying to eliminate it, or you're trying to eradicate it from your life, or you're trying to overcome it. And then there's also this other side about the green cape approach, which is, okay, yes, we're going to work on that, but let's also look at your strengths. What is it that's going well in your life right now that we can go deeper and we can almost like try to get into states of flow? And what was interesting too is at the beginning of the class, they were asking, which one would you rather do? Would you rather fight for what's wrong, or would you rather kind of like focus on what's right and keep amplifying that? And then I was immediately, well, I think you need both. I don't think you need to like choose one or the other. And then later on, they were like, yeah, this cape is reversible. So we are constantly choosing what approach to take. And it's not one or the other all the time. It's like, maybe at some points we need to examine those patterns because we're feeling more anxiety or more fear than the usual. So we take that approach. But there's other points of life where it might be more efficient and productive to actually look at what's going well. In my case, I love creativity. So I know anytime I focus on creating something or making something happen, like I'm going to feel better. I don't know how has your journey been with that, or if that resonates at all.
No, it totally does. And I'm glad that you said the red cape and the green cape approach, because I think some of the stuff where I found the spiritual community can get kind of toxic is this idea that it's like your thoughts become things, and every time you think something bad, like monitor your thoughts all the time and always be positive and always be XYZ. And you can fall into this trap of like, then that just becomes really stressful. Like, oh shit, I thought it, or oh no, I'm anxious. I'm feeling fear. Fear is the lowest vibration. I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing spirituality wrong, and like, I think there's that, once you learn about it, you fall into this pit of like, oh, shit, I know too much. And then you got to like find your way out of it almost.
I think you're right. I think in the journey to knowing yourself, and that could be through spirituality, or it could be through life experiences, or it could be through learning about psychology or philosophy, whatever is it that the door that you choose to go through, there is a point where you feel like, or at least for me, like I had to fix myself. Like there was something wrong, and it was probably my trauma and my experiences and my family and my upbringing and all these things. And I had such a good list of everything that I knew needed to be fixed. But like you said, I think at some point I fell into my own kind of like a spiral that wasn't going anywhere. It was just like, well, I know this, like, what do I do with all that? And I think to that point in that journey of let's say, growth, you choose to surrender. And you're like, well, I'm not gonna get fixed. Like it's not about that. And in that moment of surrender, in that choice of surrendering and be like, this is who I am, and I'm just gonna do the best with what I have without any expectations. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's a choice that you do every day. I think that's what has helped me the most. And I think it's just a different phase, right? And I'm probably going to go back to trying to fix myself with new tools, but it's a constant circle to me. And sometimes you just go deeper into those.
Yeah. I think, like you said, trying to fix yourself, or like you get addicted to healing. And it's like there's this idea that at one point I'll be healed and I won't have to feel anymore. Like you think, okay, cool, I'm all spiritual now, and now I'm healed and I'm good. And then you find out, no, that's not the case at all, as it turns out. You have awareness, but you still feel all of these things. And some, yeah, it feels like it's the idea that you have to heal that's actually kind of the biggest problem, almost, because it's like if you're always healing, you're always broken, versus like I'm a work in progress and I'm okay with that, maybe.
Do you think at some point you stop being a work in progress, or is that just a continuous mental? Like, what do you think? And let's get deep. Like, I don't wanna keep it at the very superficial level, because even with spirituality talks, I think you can talk around this topic without really going deeper into, I don't know, what is it that's coming up for you at this moment, and it'd be fun to just be real.
Yeah, for sure. I overshare on this thing all the time, to the point where I don't know why I'm doing this public, whatever. But for me, I think it's kind of like you're saying, like that surrender. And I don't know if I've been able to pinpoint it in that way, but I think that's a really good way to think about it. But yeah, it's this idea that, okay, instead, at a certain point, I reached this inflection where it was like, okay, there are certain things of these healing modalities which are not good for me. For me specifically, like astrology, I found myself really addicted to because I thought it would give me answers in this chaotic world, but it also gave me tons of anxiety. So it'd be like, just, don't do this today because whatever is semi quadrangle your fucking Saturn, it's like, what does that mean? And so that gave me a lot of anxiety, even though I think I got a lot of benefits from understanding myself with it. Eventually, I realized I need to cut that thread. And other things where just sort of starting to reach this point where it's like, okay, I realize I'm on this journey and it's brought like unbelievable pain. And also, I know myself now and I didn't before, which, if nothing else, that's a win. You know what I mean? Like 5 years ago, I didn't. I think I was comprised of mostly shadow, to use a young term, with like a face on top of it. Right. And so you're just sprinting around. And now I see all that shadow. I wouldn't say it's healed, but I have a much greater awareness to it. And yeah, so I think it's that reaching that point where it's not for me anymore about what self-help book can I read that'll fix me. Now it's like, what new perspective can I gain to add to this like big set of tools and interests and perspectives and things that I think make up the universe, or what we might be doing here on Earth at this time, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And it's interesting that your journey took you through astrology, and then at some point you were like, no, I can't do this anymore. Because I think with anything, astrology is just what you're plugging in. But a lot of times when we talk about spirituality, we get attached to this rigid ways of thinking that we think are going to save us to a degree. And then if we're not following through perfectly, then we think we're falling off track. It happened to me with meditation. I love meditation, but I started having these really strict rules about when to meditate, how to meditate, what would happen if I didn't meditate. And it was bringing more anxiety to my life, to when I couldn't do it because life happens, and that actually takes me to one of my other passions in life that maybe we can explore a little bit more. But it's this idea of bringing this flexibility and losing this structure that's too rigid and almost like grasping for control in terms of how we work. So the example of meditation is just one example, but in my life in general, I feel like control has been a big theme of mine, of like trying to control everything. And if I know where everything's at all times and what's going to happen, then I'm going to be okay.
Yep.
And that took me to a whole set of productivity tools. So I think what astrology was for you and productivity was for me. I became obsessed with everything around getting things done and doing it perfectly in habits. So, like Atomic Habits or the 5 a.m. Club or all the books, Carl Newport. I don't know if you've heard about him, but he's a big author on the productivity world. And I became obsessed with it. But the moment I did it wrong, then I was a bad person, or it just became a whole identity thing. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I was like, this is not right. Like, I need to develop a different way of working. And I became obsessed with the philosophy that I call conscious productivity, which is bringing mindfulness into the way we work and the way we create, and bringing more flexibility and bringing more creativity, and trying to, yes, you have some sort of structures. And I think it goes back to spirituality too. You have some things that support you, but you're always open to changing those, expanding those, and molding those. And I think that's when we start to play with life instead of attaching yourself to another identity. Like, now I am the person who does astrology, or that knows everything about the moon and the planets, or in my case, productivity and meditation. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, no, a billion percent. And it's funny because it's like the ego is like this hilarious thing that if it's even real, it is you're like constantly trying to overcome it while building new ones. Like you're building these new. Now I'm the spiritual guy. I killed my ego, but your ego is the ego of the spiritual guy. You know what I mean? Like, and so you build these identities, and it's perfectionism I learned about that was huge for me. Like Brene Brown. Do you know her at all? Yeah, like that book was like, holy I never thought I was a perfectionist. Understanding that about me and how many things I sabotaged, tore down, wouldn't let be released, like wouldn't finish because it never was right, or like before it would get close and I'd be like, no, 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 it's not right. And then I'd take it back.
Sneaky with creatives too, because if I don't know, if you consider yourself a creative, we're like, oh no, like we try all these things and we're like constantly exploring, but then you look deeper and like, but when was the last time you finished a project? Okay, what happened? Well, I was afraid of putting it out because I know that that means finishing it, and finishing it not like it is in my mind. It's a whole thing, and then procrastination comes in, and I think it is linked to spirituality, and that's what I'm fascinating on right now. Like, this side of creativity and productivity and output and whatever is it that you want to create out of life, how it's connected to your view of reality and what reality is. So if your perspective is that reality is this constantly changing, fluctuating thing, that like there's many different paths open to you at all the time, then it becomes a little bit less serious to create. And I think that's what we've been missing on when we talk about these things. Like, even when you pick a belief, you're picking to believe that it's not the final truth, right? Like, there's no final truth. So I've been in this quest to join spirituality with productivity and creativity, and it's been interesting because it's led me to work with so many amazing, brilliant people that I never thought, and realize that we all go through the same shit.
Yeah.
No matter if you are a top level designer at a architecture firm that's one of the top in Bali. I had the chance to work with a team like that, and it's the same. Like, we're still dealing with our own emotions and our fears and our perfectionism and our control. I think it makes it a lot easier when we stop fighting that and just allowing it to be part of the process, and even bring that into the planning process. Like, yeah, I know that when I'm working on a project, something's going to come up, and I'm not going to try to fight it. I'm going to try to learn meaning to it. Right.
Yeah, which sounds good in theory until fear creeps up again and you enter fight, flight, or freeze, or burn it all down and start again, which is usually my strategy. So how do you do it? And this feels like a good segue for what do you do in actuality? So that is, did you say your business?
Yeah. So I do a lot of things. I've been doing a lot of things since I can remember. For a while, I was focusing on mostly content creation while I was also having a job. So I was working as a project manager. And that's also when I started to see all this thing about productivity too. And my passion became even greater because I saw the gaps and all the ways in which we try to manage a project from beginning to end, and how disconnected we are from our humanity when we try to do so. But in that whole time, I've always been creating content. I love sharing this path and what I learned about spirituality or creativity or mindfulness. And at some point, my social media presence kind of took off, sharing my art and my words. And people started asking me, like, hey, I love what you make, but I don't have like I cannot buy anything from you. So like when are you gonna put something out? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't have time. So in the past 2 years, I've explored doing courses, workshops, coaching. I've led retreats. So we're doing me and my co-host on March next year. We're doing our third edition of the Blooming Retreat, which is a retreat for creative entrepreneurs. And we get together and we work on the personal stuff that's getting in the way of our business stuff.
Awesome. What's the most fulfilling for you, or is it all fulfilling? Like, how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it's wild because on top of that, I recently accepted another position as a project manager because that firm wanted to implement conscious productivity into their team. And it's a smaller team, and it gave me the possibility to test my ideas around mindfulness, spirituality, and productivity with an actual organization that has very complex projects and, many, many pieces. And honestly, that has been very exciting to me because there's nothing more fun than talking to a bunch of executives and asking them to sit down, breathe, and meditate with me for like 5 minutes before jumping into a high level session.
Right.
Yeah, or setting an intention, because that's a lot of what I teach in my one-on-ones or my classes. It's like, okay, we're about to sit down and do some work. What is your intention right now? What is it that you want to invite into this space, this container that we're developing to, I don't know, do a meeting or do a retreat, like anything that we're building at that moment. So I'm very excited about the intersection of this that feels very woo woo with the company or organization side of things. And we'll see what it takes me. I have no idea.
What a great feeling, though, that must be.
It's so liberating once you realize that you don't have to know every part of your path. Because for a while, I don't know if this is like that for you, Mikey, but for me, I felt like I needed to know exactly where I was going, when I was going, how I was going to get there. The more I tried to come up with this elaborate plans of how I wanted to live my life, the less it happened, or it just became so anxious and or anxiety driven. And I think it was at the beginning of this year that I was so upset that things weren't going the way that I wanted. And I remember just crying for a while and just saying, like, you know what, life, I'm done. Like, I can't keep making these plans. Like, I'm going to follow whatever is it that you want me to do. And I'm going to say yes to the opportunities that are in front of me, and I'm going to give my best to those. And that's it. And that has been like the biggest lesson because, for example, working with organizations is not something that I had in mind. And yet it's so fulfilling and exciting. And it's also bringing like another level of abundance into my life. So I don't know, I go back to that surrender of we just don't know.
Yeah, I resonate with all of that deeply. I have many times and I think this is the the mind of a creative person is you can so clearly see the end. Like the vision is right there. I just have to get there. Like it's so easy. And then you start walking towards this elaborate plan you built and this shit goes wrong. And then you get there and it's like, well, that doesn't actually work. And actually, no, now we need to change this entire thing because that's different now.
Yeah, but I think that the not working, although it hurts and it's very annoying when you thought something was gonna be a certain way and then it's not. I think it was part of the way. I don't think we can actually like make a mistake. I think that mistake was meant for us to learn something. And like a simple watered down example of this as I was hearing you is I remember last year I was invited to do an art exhibition at a event for Latina wellness entrepreneurs and creators. And I had this like huge space where I could do anything I wanted. So I had come up with this idea of this big wall, and it was going to have envelopes, and each envelope was going to have this letters that you could pull. So you would walk into this room, there was going to be this colorful wall full of envelopes, and you were going to grab whatever called to you. And it was 3 days before the exhibition, and I had sent everything to the printing shop. Everything was in my head, ready to go, that we're going to start printing. And then a hurricane came through the place where this was going to be. It was in Florida. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what? Oh my God, the printer shop wasn't going to be able to print what I needed to print. And I, I felt the moment where I could be like, I cannot, I could choose to not do anything and be like, I can't, there's no way. Or I felt, no, this is life telling me that I wasn't being as creative as I could be. Like, I get it. This was a safe choice. I know. I've seen this done before, the whole wall with the envelopes. Like, I've seen it. So, what can you do? Ended
Yeah.
up coming up with this cool idea with what I already had of hanging envelopes from the ceiling of the floor and putting flowers in between, something that I could buy right away, and writing the letters. And people loved it. We had speakers, we had conferences, and when you see the pictures of that event, most of them were this space with hanging envelopes and notes for people to pick. So you would almost like walk through it, close your eyes, pick one from the ceiling. And that would have never happened if things didn't work out how I thought. So I think it's like that, but with life.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One thing you said that was interesting, you said maybe the universe was telling me that I wasn't being as creative as I could be. And I thought that was interesting because I do that too, where it's like I must have either veered off my path or the choice I made wasn't right. And this is the universe letting me know that no, that wasn't the right choice. You're going to do it this way. Do you think is that to you what feels like intuitively? Is that how it works? Or was it a coincidence or what?
I don't believe in coincidence. I don't know. I'm a idealist. I think everything happens by design. And yeah, I think it was that. I think it was life telling me like, hey, you could push a little bit harder. Let's make it impossible for you to stay safe. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. And well, and even just the ability to let go and release the attachment to the outcome that you wanted to be true. And just be able to say, okay, fuck it. What else can we do right now?
Yeah. And it's interesting when you're creating too. I think I had a feeling that this wasn't it, like the way that I had decided wasn't its final iteration, but I was almost like too lazy to think through something else, or I knew it was going to take more time and more energy and more, and maybe I didn't have the time or the energy at that moment. And I just love it when life makes it so that, or the universe or circumstances, whatever you want to call it, I don't attach to any label. But I think it's so fascinating when you're left with no option but to do what you can do.
Yeah, which Lord knows, I've been there before. You said a term a bunch of times, conscious. What did you say? This is this a term that you coined? Like, is this what you productivity? And is this is
Yes.
your thing?
This is my thing, and this is my dream to develop a philosophy around it. So I wrote a manifesto that's being published and, well, self-published, and I leave cards anywhere I go with a little QR code where people can scan it, and little messages of, we can go slow, we can be meaningful, the direction matters more than velocity. So I've been working on developing the pillars of that framework, because to me it's a framework that you can use to view your process of working and creating or developing any project. And so right now the pillars that I've developed are presence, purpose, and practice. And each of them have things that you can go deeper, and a lot of it also comes from my own research and positive psychology, and things that there are theories out there that help us prove and understand this. Like when we look at purpose, which is one of the pillars of conscious productivity, there's this one book that changed my life. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you've read it, by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, Holocaust survivor. I've never read it, but it comes up a lot, and I probably should. At
Yeah.
this
I mean, whenever it calls to you, then it'll be the time to read it. But I read it when I was very young, and he was a psychotherapist or psychoanalyst, and he, yeah, like you said, a Holocaust survivor, and he went through that horrible experience, and the thing that kept him kind of like grounded to his sense of identity when everything else was taken away from him, his clothes, his dignity, his name, he was left with being a number. He used that time to try to understand what helps someone survive horrible circumstances. And one of the things that he noticed is that people that had a sense of purpose or meaning, even if it was something as simple as believing that someone was waiting for them on the other side of this horrible experience that they were going through, that had a certain correlation with surviving and making it and not giving up. So purpose, in his book, he talks about purpose in a way that's so beautiful. He talks about it not being this like amazing or huge thing that you have to discover and be like, this is the purpose of my life. I'm going to change the world this way, right? In this trap that we can fall into. And I certainly have fallen down that path many times because like, yeah, it could be that if you're lucky, you find that great, sure. But it's the purpose that you give to any moment, to any activity. So that bringing it back to work, bringing it back to creating, like, what is my purpose at this moment? Like right now, just being here, being honest, opening up my heart, having this conversation. I think we underestimate the power of those little mindsets when we are doing live.
Yes, totally. I think I fall into that. I, for a long time, felt like if I wasn't literally actively trying to save the world, I wasn't doing enough, which I think is like ego, shame, uh, privilege. I don't really know. We're still unpacking that. But I was consistently trying to like figure out the thing. Well, and I think what I figured out is childhood trauma. I was raised in a very chaotic atmosphere. And so I think I grew up with this idea that if I can just make the world safe, I won't feel anxious anymore. And I think that's sort of where I've ended up with it. But the other thing that you made me think of is like purpose can often, like, I think that we create what we think our purpose is supposed to be versus being. You know what I mean? And that's been a lot of my experience too, especially with overcoming perfectionism of like, who actually are you? And maybe your purpose is just to be open and present versus I need to figure out this thing that makes my existence worthwhile. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like you have a purpose right now?
I I think I'm finding it, maybe. I've had over the last couple of years a lot of trials to sort of show me myself over and over again and my own bullshit. And I think over the last this year specifically, I started painting, and the paintings became sort of this thing about anti perfectionism and just helping me communicate exactly what I was thinking as I was thinking it. And the videos are kind of shitty and weird, and I don't care. Like the paintings are, some are good, some are not. And I think it's me just working through that. Like, I think my purpose right now is to sort of lead by way of imperfection, meaning putting shit out there that is of varying degrees of polish or good and allowing that to be okay so I can work through that karma or whatever you want to call it for myself.
Mhm.
And maybe in doing so, find like-minded people or have good conversations like this, where before I would have done this podcast and it would have been a marketing and design podcast, and I would have been like, so tell me about your business. Like, and it would have been bullshit and I would have hated it and I would have hated myself, the whole time. And now it's more like, no, I don't know what this is, but it's true, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that you say that because I think you're tapping into something that's very important when we talk about spirituality and understanding yourselves and all this thing about purpose. And it's like you're actually taking action. You're doing something. You're out of your head and you're playing with paint or whatever medium is it that you choose. There's something healing or I don't know, something honest when you sit down and do the work that you thought needed to be perfect and you just start doing one after another and after another. And like the first one sucked, the second one probably sucked too, the third one, I don't know. But like you learn so much about yourself just by putting into action whatever is it that's calling you. And a lot of my work with creatives when they come to me is we create like a little series. We create a project that they can build a series on, and a lot of times that could be content, or it could be art, or it could be photographs. And what I want to get them to is like not this idea that we have to create the one thing that's going to be the next thing and it's going to like break us into the world as like this creative stars and this like amazing business or unicorn business. It's like, no, let's from the beginning say that we're going to have to make more than 10 to even like understand what we're doing. So we set this almost like design constraints for this project. And we're like, okay, so we're going to build a series, and what is the series going to be about? Like in your case, I don't know, you mentioned something about like overcoming imperfection. So that's like the main theme of the series. And then the form that the series takes could probably change. Like right now, our videos, maybe at some point they become, I don't know, you take pictures of the paintings and they become a little book and you write something next to it. Like the form of it can always be evolving, but you have this project that's letting you to learn. So that's something interesting to think about.
No, and you're right where I am. And I think creating things that are allowed to live and evolve versus making a product that will be the product and then you sell the product, but when the product is the conversation, that conversation can change, and like stay whatever in the present moment. And I think that's what I would do a lot is it would be this thing, and this thing is the vessel for both saving the world, making me happy, money, et cetera, et cetera. And that thing needed to be perfect. And then you push it out there and then you keep getting people to buy that thing. And I think it's not that there's no value in creating ideas and putting them out there, but I think, yeah, that the opposite of that is this, like, I don't know, have a messy conversation where you go too deep and put it on the internet and then do it again, like.
I'm guilty as that as well. That's what I do with all the content that I put out. I go inside as deep as I can and find those threads that are so personal. Because they're so personal, they end up being universal, right? Like I know that I felt this feeling so deeply in the process of trying to create something or trying to build my business or trying to put, I don't know, a book out there or an art installation. Like I know the feelings of insufficiency and of fear and of, I don't know, rejection, that I don't want to be rejected for putting this. I find that and I put it out. And interestingly enough, a lot of people resonate with that, is that humanity piece. So I applaud you for having this kind of conversations.
I appreciate it. I'm doing my best. I think one of my biggest anxieties is like saying the wrong thing. Like, oh, I said something and now people think I'm dumb, or they're angry because they was misunderstood. And so this podcast is definitely a opportunity to work through that shit, I will say.
Right.
Your content is like always like beautiful and polished, and I can't understand it because it's in Spanish. But what it is, like, when I looked at it, I was like, holy shit, like this is like really well done, and the execution across the board. So
Thank you. It's funny because it's like how I end up connecting with my clients, my community, with the collaborations that I make. I know there's a lot of I don't know, lots of feelings around social media and putting content out there. But I think if you're creative, it's part of the journey at this moment. It's just like the venue that we're using right now. And I think that once you find kind of like your jam, something that you enjoy, not because you have to create, but because you love creating it, that's a whole ball game. It opens up so many other states of feelings of creation when you start seeing it like that, like almost like building up your body of work.
yeah, you become like a cinematic universe in and of yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're like building all these little things that work together. And I agree, like it's so easy to shit on social media, but it's like we didn't used to have this option of like just being able to be creative, be yourself, put your message out there, and like it's a good message,
Yeah. 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 And you
Yeah.
mentioned something interesting about, for example, like what I create. You said like, it's in Spanish. And yeah, I think part of what I've been called to do is to bring some of these concepts that we're discussing right now to the to the Hispanic speaking community, because there are lots of books and there are resources and research and tools that I have learned that are available in English that I wanted to bring to the Spanish speaking community. I'm from Venezuela, and like even something as simple like talking about the heart and creating from the heart. I told myself, once my mom learns how to speak English, I will do content in English. But for now, because she can only read Spanish, I'm gonna keep creating it in Spanish. And I think that connects with this idea of creativity, productivity, and spirituality, right? Like when you create something that's aligned and coherent with who you are, that comes from your heart, it's going to resonate because you're resonating with it first. And I think that's a key.
It resonates beyond words because I saw your content, couldn't understand it, but it resonated. I was like, I don't know what this is saying, but I feel it. You know, maybe I'll just learn Spanish as a result. Finally, my dad's from Argentina, but he didn't teach us because my mom didn't want us to be confused. If I could go back in time and fix one thing, like, can you just fucking teach me Spanish? That'd be very convenient. You
I
know.
know.
Okay, we're coming up on the hour. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to cover?
The conversation too, because where I needed to go. If there is something that I just want to reinforce is this idea that whatever you are in your path, you know, whether you consider yourself a creative or not, or you're building a project or a business, following who you truly are. I know it sounds hard and it is hard, but staying true and committed to your curiosities and your interests and whatever excites you, I think that's always going to be the most productive route. I think it's whenever we start looking at other people and looking at the sides and be like, I should be doing that, or even with your personal growth trajectory. You know, I think whenever you start looking at the sides, you just get lost because you're not coming from here. So I think the simplest way is just to follow. I know it's cheesy, but follow your heart.
No, it's true. You got to figure out where your heart is, you know, and that's part of the journey. That was my.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the work in merging the idea of spirituality and business is not allowed. And especially if you're a guy, I think that's where a lot of toxicity is bred. And merging, allowing for this idea of spirituality to be considered. We'll call it whatever you want to call that thing, woo, like spirit, heart. With business, I think is so important. And just talking about that.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's not only like important, I think it's like needed. I think we are in this moment of our society where the way that we do business, like it's going to have to change. And it started to change, right? We're seeing a little bit more of people that are shopping based on their values and like doing a little bit more research about what's behind. But not only from that side, from the personal side, like we know that burnout rates are high. Like burnout has been a huge thing since the pandemic. Everybody's talking about it, but what's the solution? Like how do we fix that, or not even fix it, how do we cultivate a different state of working? And I think that's wherever, to me, in my journey, positive psychology comes in and tells us, hey, like there's all these tools that are research based, and there is like evidence that proves that being a little bit more spiritual or leaning into your strengths, or I don't know, there's this cool theory that I always come back to. It's called the broaden and build theory of positive emotions. And it talks about how when you are in a state of joy, creativity, or curiosity, or any positive emotion that, I don't know, playfulness, that actually has an impact in your brain, because when you're feeling those emotions, you are more open to seeing a broader perspective of life. So you might be able to see other perspectives and opportunities that you didn't see whenever you were constricted and anxious and stressed. So then seeing those opportunities when you're in this state of openness, or whatever emotion you're feeling that feels good, then you might take a different action that could have a long-term effect in your life and your business. So it's even things like this that we know, and there's been research done to prove that that's the case, but we just don't look at it enough. And especially like you're saying, like people in business. So yeah, bringing this to this side it's a whole passion of mine.
Yeah, no, I love it. It needs to be done. I would love to do this again sometime. I want to dive deeper on positive psychology and understand more of that. Um, Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me here and being open to just taking the conversation wherever it wanted to go. And yeah, just happy to share.